Chapter 12. A few days later, my job cleaning the ghetto ended and I was put back to work in Plazow. Without Uncle Moshi, there was no one to help me get a job outside the camp again. The work was brutal and the food too meager to sustain me. Some mornings I could barely get myself up out of my bunk and I had a hard time standing at roll call. Was this how it happened? Was this how a prisoner slipped from being a person to a muselmanner? One night, after a hard day's work digging trenches for new latrines, I collapsed to the floor of my barrack. I didn't have the strength to climb into my bunk. I was desperate to get up, but I couldn't make my legs obey me, couldn't pull up my own weight with my stick and straw arms. But if I didn't get up soon, the capo would come through and he would beat me for not being in my bunk. No one bent to help me in my struggle to stand. Everyone else was like me. They barely had energy to spare for themselves, let alone anyone else. Be no one, care for no one. That's how you survive. That's what Uncle Moshi had taught me. Moshi, I thought, my chest aching. Why aren't you here? Why did you have to die? I need help. I need a friend. I needed Moshi. He would have helped me back up, despite his warning not to care. Who would help me now? I rolled myself onto my chest to push myself up, but the board beneath me was loose. Wait, a loose board? I knew the capo would come any minute now, but lying there on the floor and staring right at the board made me remember building the new barracks across the camp when I first arrived. There was always a space, a small one, between the wooden floor and the dirt below. If this board was loose enough... The board pulled loose from the floor in my shaking hands. I glanced around to see if anyone had noticed, but of course no one had. The other prisoners were doing whatever they could to ignore me, just like I ignored them. The gap in the boards would be wide enough for me to slide down inside into the space between the floor and the ground. I was tempted to pull the board all the way up and roll down inside and disappear, but my absence from my bunk would be noticed. And what would I do? Hide down there forever? I would be dead even quicker without what little bread and soup they gave us. But tomorrow, after roll call, I could disappear into the barracks instead of showing up for my job. People were reassigned all the time. No one would know I was gone. I could sneak back and hide under the floor. It was like Moshi was helping me, even though he wasn't there. He had shown me the board. As I pushed myself up off the floor with every gram of strength I had left, I felt Moshi's hand helping me up. I reached out and grabbed hold of the bunk, clawing my way into my bed. I was not a muselman. Not yet. The next morning after roll call, I grabbed the two boys I knew in my barrack, Thomas and Isaac, and showed them the board. I don't know why I showed them. Not when you survived by looking out for yourself and only yourself. Maybe it was because I'd wanted someone to help me when I had needed it. Maybe it was just that I would be lonely in there all day. But maybe it was that I just couldn't keep the secret from someone else who could use help too. I'd done that with the black market food Moshi had bought for us, and I'd felt guilty. I didn't want to hide out under the floor alone while everyone else was worked to death. We can't, Thomas said immediately. If we're caught, we'll be killed. We'll die if we don't hide there, I told them. Do you want to go back out there and be worked to death? Or worse, killed by Goth? No, but this is begging for punishment. This is survival, I told them. I pulled up the board the rest of the way. There's room inside for all three of us. Isaac crawled down inside and Thomas finally gave in. At first, all we did was sleep. We had been worked so hard and fed so little, all our bodies wanted to do was hibernate like bears. The ground was hard, but it didn't matter. So were the wooden pallets we called beds. We slept, only waking long enough to poke one another if we snored. The sound of footsteps on the floor above woke us, and we knew it was time to come out for roll call. We couldn't miss a roll call, or they would come looking for us. As prisoners began to come back into the barracks, we pushed our way out, hurriedly replacing the floorboard and sitting down on my bunk like we had just come back from work. Nobody ever suspected, or if they did, they didn't say anything. Talking got you killed. The more we hid under the floor, the stronger we got. We weren't healthy, not by a long shot, but without the heavy labor of the day, our bodies recovered a little. I didn't have any more trouble climbing back into my bunk each night. And Thomas, Isaac, and I started to sleep less during the day, staying awake to whisper with one another. We talked about food, mostly, but also our homes and our families until it hurt too much to remember. Then we'd roll over and sleep again, always listening for the soft step of prisoners' feet on the floor above to let us know when to come out. But one day, it wasn't footsteps we heard. It was voices. And in the middle of the day. Isaac slithered over to look out the cracks in the crawlspace wall. What he saw made him gasp. "It's Goth," he whispered. "Goth and his dogs, and 2 guards, and they're heading for our barrack." "We're dead," Thomas said. "Those dogs will smell us right away. They'll find us and we'll be shot." The tight little crawl space under the floorboards suddenly felt like a coffin, like I was already dead and buried. My refuge from the nightmare of Plazow was now a trap. It was all I could do not to burst out of it screaming. "Yannick, what do we do?" Isaac asked, his voice tight with the same desperation I felt. I looked out through the cracks. Goth was coming closer, all shining black leather boots and crisp black uniform. One of his dogs lifted its ears and looked right at me. I pulled back away from the wall. "We're trapped. We have to get out of here. We have to get out of here." I was almost choking on my own fear. "And go where?" Thomas hissed. "If we leave, they'll find us in the barrack." "I don't care. We can't be caught here." I twisted and squirmed until I was on my back. If I could just lift that board, see the light from the room, breathe the air. It was so tight down here, so close, closing in. Isaac grabbed my hand. "Yannick, we can't." "We have to. I had to get out of this coffin. We'll pretend we're on a work detail." "He'll kill us. God will kill us," Thomas said. "Either he'll kill us or he won't," I told him. "But I know one thing, if he finds us hiding down here, he'll kill us for sure." I pushed my way up and out of the crawl space. It felt like coming up for air after being underwater. I was free of my little coffin. I gasped, filling my lungs. But if I didn't really want to die, I had to move fast. We all did. I helped Isaac out, then Thomas, and we put the board back as quickly and quietly as we could. My heart was thumping, but it made me feel alive, and feeling alive made me want to stay alive. The only way we were going to get out of this was to make Goth believe we were on a work detail, and he could smell fear as well as his dogs could, maybe even better. I dragged Isaac and Thomas to the door with me. "Come on," I said. "I'll do the talking." We left the barrack right as Goth and his dogs turned the corner. "You there! Stop!" Goth shouted. "Where are you going?" My hands shook as I doffed my cap like we were drilled to do. "We were sent to a work detail on the south side of camp, sir," I shouted, my voice breaking. I was trembling so badly. Goth's dogs stared at us, panting. Their ears pricked up like they were just waiting for Goth to tell them to attack us. Could they smell my fear? Did the dogs know I was lying? I stood my ground and tried not to shake. I was deathly afraid, but everyone was afraid when they met Goth, whether they'd been hiding or not. Goth glared at us for a long moment, then walked by without saying another word. Isaac and Thomas and I stood rooted to the spot, afraid to say or do anything that would make Goth reconsider. When he was a few steps gone, I realized that not moving was the wrong thing, and I grabbed my friends and pulled them along again. "Let's go," I whispered, and we hurried around the corner. We didn't stop when Goth was out of sight, but I could finally breathe. In trying to survive, I'd come closer than I'd ever been to dying. I would never hide under the floorboards again.